Good afternoon, Attorney Griggs. Thank you for meeting with the Black Wall Street Times. We appreciate your time. Could you start by giving us an overview of this issue, of how we got here from when the City Council approved this proposed public safety training facility to today?
Okay, so we have to go back in time a little bit. 2017, the Atlanta Police Foundation started having conversations about trying to build a public safety training center. Fast forward to 2021, the former mayor of the city, Keisha Lance Bottoms, unveiled a plan to repurpose and build a new training facility. It passed council, and ultimately they started negotiations with the Atlanta Police Foundation, and it morphed over into this administration where they took up the mantle of signing the contract, again passing it through council, and now they started to break ground. Right after it was initially announced, there were protests of this. We had just come out of this, 2020 Freedom Summer, as I call it, the protests for George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and then ultimately Rayshard Brooks. And so the refrain of the community was police accountability. Some kind of way the politicians turned that into more training. And so that has been the refrain from the community, that they weren't calling for more training. They were calling for police accountability, which means holding police officers accountable when they violate the public trust through terminations and through prosecutions. And so the Defend the Forest group grew out of some of the protests, and they started to occupy the forest. And then, of course, it led into where we are now with individuals being arrested and charged with domestic terrorism, other groups leading attempts to have a referendum. And of course, the position of the NAACP has been from the inception that the Public Safety Training Center in its current iteration should not be built in that location. And we need to be focused on actual police accountability in the numerous cases that have come from Atlanta police, from Jimmy Atchison to Oscar Kane to Kane Rogers to Nigel Cullins, now to Deacon Johnny Holloman, and so many others that have not received justice while the Police Foundation is trying to push a training center.
As the Atlanta NAACP president, where do the majority of Black Georgians stand on this issue?
I think the majority of Black Georgians and the majority of Black Atlantans are opposed to the building of the training center. I think that there's been an attempt to have a PR campaign to show that they are in favor of it. But, I keep my finger on the pulse. They're more focused on law enforcement not killing individuals than they are in training law enforcement. And so what needs to happen at this point is a public vote so that we can see that there's actually more opposition. Because right now, people are taking polls, and I can ask 1,000 people question a certain way and you'll get the response you want. But if we turn to the cradle of this city, which is our voting rights, which is our civil rights, you will see the voice of the community. I mean, anytime you can get 117,000 people to sign a petition, that's almost 3 times the number of people who voted. So we have to go back to our bedrock principles of democracy. And I think if the democracy takes place, you will see that a majority of the people in the city of Atlanta do not want a large-scale police training center to be built. Now, they're also conflating the issue that it's a public safety training center. Now, nobody has any opposition to a fire department or EMTs or EMS being trained. We believe a facility for that should be built. But when you combine that with a $90 million training facility, which is for the most part for law enforcement, meaning the police, that's when the issue comes. We had the largest protest in the history of this city. That says a lot, considering this is the cradle of civil rights. The largest protest in the history of the city was for police accountability. No one was talking about the fire department. No one was talking about EMS. They're trying to conflate that to mask the issue that the public is focused on, and that's police accountability. And I think once the city focuses on that, then we can have a conversation about a training facility somewhere else that doesn't damage all that green space, that's in an area that's in incorporated city of Atlanta, where the Atlanta voters have a say on what's done on that property, not somewhere in unincorporated DeKalb County where there's no accountability. So there are a host of issues that arise out of the building of this facility, namely its location and its purpose.
You mentioned there's been over 117,000 signatures turned in, and yet the mayor's office has filed injunctions and placed legal hurdles preventing the counting of those signatures.
Right now, my understanding is they are certifying the signatures. They were going to use a very interesting process at first that would have been very undemocratic. And if it had been done by anybody else other than the city of Atlanta, you'd have the whole state going up in arms and talking about voter suppression, which it is voter suppression. But now they are certifying the count and still waiting on the ruling of the appellate court on whether or not it can move forward. But I think that the city of its own accord can go ahead and put this on the ballot for a ballot referendum and see what the will of the people are. You know, if the will of the people are for it to be built, the people will vote and the people will decide. But right now what we're saying is, oh, we believe the people want this, but we don't want to put it in front of the people. That's being disingenuous, especially in the birthplace of Dr. King, in the home of John Lewis, in the home of C.T. Vivian. It cuts counterintuitive to what we all hold dear in this city, and that's civil rights, voting rights, making sure we have a representative democracy.
Now, Mayor Andre Dickens, he sees things a little differently. He's defended the plans, but he's also faced some criticism, right? We've had Georgia Senator Raphael Warnock actually send a letter to the mayor asking to ensure that this will be a transparent process, having concerns about what you said, the initial format they were going to use to verify signatures. Do you believe this process has been transparent and fair?
Well, as somebody who sat on the task force for the South River Forest Public, who sat on the task force for the South River redevelopment, I've told the mayor in no uncertain terms that this has to be transparent, that we have to go by the will of the people. I've also told him that one of the recommendations of that task force should be for the current iteration of the Public Safety Training Center, commonly known as Cop City, not to be built in its current iteration and location. So I'm going to tell you the same thing I told the mayor. As the representative of the oldest civil rights organization in this state, we don't want more militarized police to be terrorizing African-American communities. We also don't want the suppression of black voters. Let's be clear. The state didn't turn blue. It turned black. And we were one of the organizations that pushed that vote. And if you suppress more black voters, you will hear directly from the oldest, the boldest, the most cussed and discussed. So my hope is moving forward that the mayor will honor the legacy of this city, not just in word, but in deed, by allowing the people to vote, and we'll see what happens.
You had mentioned that you were hopeful that the mayor will listen to the community and allow those signatures to be verified and allow for a public vote. If the city continues to prevent a public vote, do you see anywhere where the NAACP might take more action?
Well, we have three methods of changing people's minds. One is advocacy, which is what I'm doing right now. The other is litigation, and then the other is legislation. All three are on the table. So if they start to attempt to subvert or suppress people's votes, you'll hear from the LDF, you'll hear from the Office of General Counsel, and then ultimately you'll hear from all of our lawyers, the same way we sue in the state of Georgia. My hope is in a chocolate city where, all the elected officials look like me, they are not on the other side of a lawsuit that says the NAACP v. anybody. You don't want to go down in history like that. So, my hope is, Mayor Dickens is a good friend of mine. We'll be able to see eye to eye, and this will be placed on the ballot for a vote.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Just that, in the birthplace of Dr. King, in the cradle of civil rights, it's a shame that we're even having this conversation. We had the biggest protest in the history of this town. Hundreds of thousands of people marched. We were outside for 150 days, and nobody wants to say Ray Shard's name. Nobody wants to say Jimmy's name. Nobody wants to say Miguel Terran's name. Nobody's saying Johnny Holloman's name, but yet we want to build a $90 million public safety training center. I think that we're a little misplaced in what actually is happening in this city. We need to address the systemic culture of police violence in this city before we even start the conversation about police training. You can't train your way out of police violence. What you can do is hold the individuals accountable in a courtroom for things that are against the laws of this state. So the message that I want to leave as the president of the oldest civil rights organization is that we need to get on the right side of civil rights. We need to live like W.E.B. Du Bois, who is a member of the Atlanta branch. We need to live like Julian Bond, who is a member of the Atlanta branch. We need to live like Dr. Martin Luther King Sr., who was the president of the Atlanta NAACP. So when we talk about legacy of civil rights, we're talking about the Atlanta NAACP. And the Atlanta NAACP is telling the city of Atlanta, get on the right side of civil rights. Otherwise, you're going to get on the wrong side of us.